Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Friday, and that means Friday Reads, where a lot of booktubers will give a progress report on what they're recently finished, what they're currently reading, and what they're going to read in the future. It can sometimes be a little bit self-conscious for me because I do nothing but read. So usually I am not actually, in the gerund sense, in the present sense, actually reading a book. Usually I take the little bean for a walk, settle her down, make sure she's good for a while, and then I settle myself down, either here on the fainting couch or on the bed in the little book room, and simply pick up what my next book is and read it. And I don't stop until I'm finished. And then when I'm done, I get up, stretch, and do something else. But that isn't always true. There are books that I'm giving more work than others. And so I feel like I have examples from all three for this list today. We'll start with one that I think you could say, working on. It's this. I think we saw this. I think I got the advance copy in the mail. This is a new edition of the annotated, a new annotated edition of the Memoirs of William Tecumseh Sherman. I think it's safe to say that I'm working on this book. I have read Sherman's Memoirs 2 or 3 times. I've written about them, I think, once at least. You'd have to ask David Murphy. But this is annotated, so there's a lot of stuff to do. There's been one earlier annotated edition of the memoirs. I need to compare it to that. And I also need to assess, the where and when and why of the annotations happening at all, since Sherman's memoirs are usually grouped with Grant's memoirs as being marvels of forceful, plain, easily understandable prose. Of course, that's only half the battle, right? Every generation that comes to Sherman's memoirs, every new generation that comes to it knows less about the background material than the one before it. So there's plenty of fodder for annotations here, and I want to assess how well it's doing all of that, while at the same time trying to keep at bay my personal antipathy for Sherman himself, who was a genocidal monster. And who is never described that way. He is never characterized that way by worshipful biographers. I've read probably 6 biographies of this guy. None of them even come close to criticizing him in the way that he deserves. They never even come close to doing it, any more than they do for Nathan Bedford Forrest or Stonewall Jackson or even Robert E. Lee. There's something about the military figures of the American Civil War, and I guess we have to consider Sherman that, even though when I think of him for genocide, not for warfare, which took place after the American Civil War. But I think you could say that I am reading this. I am assessing what kind of a job it does as an annotated companion to Sherman's book. Then this next one is something that of a type that I mentioned I think in the last Friday Reads I mentioned this as well. This is a Pride and Prejudice variation, which is not the same thing as a pastiche. It's not a prequel or a sequel or anything like that. Instead, it's an author going at the raw bones, the architecture of Pride and Prejudice, and changing things around to see what will happen if you do that. Just to see what will happen if you do that. A number of you, I forget if it was the last time I mentioned, last Friday Reads or the one before that, but the last time I mentioned a Pride and Prejudice variation, a number of you emailed me and said that you do enjoy them too. A lot of them are dumb. A lot of them are expecting Pride and Prejudice to do all the work, which is absolutely not right. You cannot do that, no matter what kind of dependent writing you're doing, whether it's pastiche or an homage or a variation. You have to carry the ball yourself. And I haven't read this yet, so I don't know what kind it will be. This is by Juliana Abbott, and it's called Mr. Darcy and the Mysterious Miss B, with lovely AI cover there that is very different from the standard, I won't say standard, but the most popular AI model covers that I'm seeing lately are really ugly. I'm sure you know the type I'm talking about. If I'd thought ahead of time, I would have an example, but there are hundreds of examples now. They're very brown, and the characters are all the same. They all look sad and squat and overfed. It's like a Ghibli version of AI, only because no, there are no accurate anatomies involved, but also grim and grubby. I'm very glad this isn't that. But from what I remember of this, the premise twist here is actually an interesting one, which is what would have happened to the Bennet girls if Netherfield Hall had not been let at last? What would have happened to the Bennet girls if Bingley and then his circle and Mr. Darcy had never come to the country? And it would easily have happened. It was just random chance that they did. What if they never had? What would have happened from there? What if you spin a story from there? Is there any way that the mysterious Miss B, Elizabeth Bennet, would intersect with Darcy? Because the goal of a lot of these, in fact, all the ones that I've read, the goal of these Pride and Prejudice variations is always to get you back to Pride and Prejudice. Maybe not the explicit goal, but the reading goal here is that you know how the story should come out. And you're seeing how much you can mess it up and still get it to come back to that. I don't know if that will be true. I will see. Then this next one I also have not read, but it's a subgenre that I know well. This is by Brian Buckby with Carol Ann Fitzgerald, and it's called We Should All Be Birds. And it's a memoir in which the author claims to have a chronic illness and takes in a pigeon. So it's one of those stories where he has the pigeon right there and he has nowhere to go, so he is able to observe the pigeon very closely, and it observes him. One of those, the cliche here is that I thought I saved a pigeon, but the pigeon really saved me. You know the type of book I'm talking about. And I've read a number of these, whether it's a pigeon or a snail or whatever, and I tend to like them, even though they all share one thing in common, which is that the illness that the author is suffering from is psychosomatic. 100% of the time. There is nothing physically wrong with Brian Buckby. I don't know, I haven't read this book, don't know anything about him. I can unconditionally guarantee that. There's nothing physically wrong with him. Now, whether that is just a lie that is a gimmick to make the book possible, to make the whole mechanism of the book possible, which I guess would be okay. I guess it would be in a way. Why you need to be immobilized to tell us what you observed about this bird, I don't know. I've made lots of strong friendships with non-human animals without being immobilized. Whether it's that or whether it's just psychopathy, I don't know. Every once in a while I will read a book like this where it clearly is psychopathy. By the 80th or 90th page, you know there's nothing wrong with the author, and that the author kind of knows that you know that. And then it becomes really queasy-making. Okay, what is this that you're doing with this animal then? If the whole premise of you being cooped up with this animal is a lie, then what's going on here? And the answer to that is never good. So I don't know. I don't know how this will be. Some of them that I've read carry it off just fine. Don't ever give me really the heebie-jeebies like that. So maybe this one will. I don't know. It's certainly a charming premise. I will read pretty much any book on pigeons. They are utterly fascinating. They're the quintessential omnipresent urban bird. Although, in my particular area, they are rare. Very rare. I don't hear it in the environs of Hyde Cottage. We've got starlings. We've got mourning doves, lots of them. We've got sparrows, of course. I am unfortunately guilty of helping to abet the sparrow population. But pigeons? I don't see many of them. But in downtown Boston, they're ubiquitous. So, not far away. They're ubiquitous. So I'm always up for reading about them. I think they're utterly fascinating. I've met quite a few of them. I've known people who kept them as pets, and they're very much, there's a person there, very much so. And this next one I read last night, I got it yesterday. This is Advice to a Young Critic by George Bernard Shaw. This is a collection of, billed itself as a collection of letters that Shaw exchanged with one particular man, who went on to become a theater impresario and a critic on his own. And it does do that. It does do that. Shaw was a brilliant theater critic. He was actually a brilliant book critic as well. But it does a lot more than that as well, which ends up feeling like a lot less. It's really just a very small collection of Shaw's correspondence. It isn't just about criticism, or the thing that is somewhat teasingly promised in the title is never delivered. This is not anything like a critic's manifesto from George Bernard Shaw, which I guess in retrospect that shouldn't surprise me. I would think that if such a thing existed, I would know about it, and I think such a thing does exist. Actually, in a big way, in an unplanned way. Because the thing that I was thinking about when I read this book was an enormous book, something 50 times the size of this thing. A huge collection of Shaw's prefaces and essays. that I've had from time to time. I've had a copy of that. I don't think it was ever published in America. But every once in a while, a UK hardcover will cross my path. It hasn't in like 10 years. And I don't know why I keep getting rid of it. Maybe the last copy that I had fell apart. Could be. I can't imagine. I don't think I know anyone who would want it. But that volume is just amazing. Because Shaw is really good as a critic. But this is mainly him writing about whatever plays he has on, or frustrations he has with theater groups, or backers, or actresses, or whatnot. So I enjoyed it. As a piece of Shaviana, I enjoyed it, because Shaw is always enjoyable. But then this next one, I finally got around to reading in full. Late, very late. I know a couple of critics who've read this thing. Critics never read anything. And not only that, but I have published a review of this on Open Letters Review, the online literary journal, where I'm one of the editors. And if you feel like trying your hand at writing formal book reviews that get read by the literary establishment, feel free to let me know, and we can try you out at Open Letters Review. But I've run a review of this thing, and I dipped into it. I got a sample and read it when the only samples were available, and I've had it. I've had the advanced copy for a while, but I finally got around to reading Hotel Ukraine by Martin Cruz Smith, the final Arkady Renko novel, the final adventure of a character who shot to fame with Gorky Park. And I loved it. It was just fantastic, right down to the Hollywood-style ending. There's a very tense Hollywood-style action piece ending that is delightful, just delightful. And I read all that. I read the character build-up, and there's a twist in the middle that was well handled, not exactly untelegraphed, but well handled. Arkady Renko himself as a character, dogged and just a tiny bit smarter than most other people. No Sherlock Holmes mysteries. He's not another planet, but you definitely know why you're rooting for him. I read all of that. I read all the way to the twist at the end, which is the climax. The action at the end, which is great fun. And then I got to the most dramatic thing in the book, which isn't part of the story. It's the author's note, in which Martin Cruz Smith writes about how he's been living his whole life with Parkinson's, and that this is the last Arkady Renko novel that he isn't capable of writing another book. So he's going to go out while in fine form. He's not going to fight against that or ignore it. He's not able to do it anymore. And of course, so that ended up being true. So this isn't the final Arkady Renko novel because the author got hit by a car. The author is dead, but he died of complications due to Parkinson's. So he knew he was writing the last book. And there's something about that was just wrenchingly sad for me. That hit me more than the rest of the book did. But the rest of the book was really good. I'm glad I finally got to it. Then we have another thing that I read last night from a pile of books that I got yesterday. This is Essential Stories by V.S. Pritchett. This is a little collection of his short stories. I have frog-marched at one point or another my way through the entirety of the big phone book-sized collected short stories. But even when I was doing that, it still seemed like they were much of a muchness and probably did not deserve such a big anthology. It was so inconvenient to carry around. So I was hoping that I would find this smaller anthology, and I did, and I dove into it last night. I haven't read the introduction by Jeremy Treglone. I don't know what kind of stuff he pulls out of his you-know-what to talk about these things, but to me, it was Alice Munro. It was just Alice Munro. It was just people sitting around kitchen tables talking about inconsequential stuff. There were 2 stories in this collection where something actually happens. Anything actually happens. It wasn't anything big. It wasn't anything important or anything. It was just a couple of times something did happen. Most of these stories, they don't. So I have a feeling that this introduction would take the same tack that I've seen other people take with Pritchett's fiction, which is that it's a marvelous pointillist observation of ordinary everyday life. It might be, but it's still boring. And as far as I'm concerned, if you write boring fiction, your fiction is bad. Which should not be the only time that will crop up in this Friday read. So I'm glad that I have this. If maybe there's an element of Pritchett that I'm missing, certainly for decades I've been told there's an element of Alice Munro that I'm missing. Spinster aunts consulting train schedules at the kitchen table. And then what's the news story? Well, it's a couple of spinster aunts somewhere in Canada consulting train schedules at the kitchen table. Okay, how about 30 years later? Master of her craft, given every award that hasn't been nailed down. Surely now she's, no, it's a pair of spinster aunts consulting a train schedule at a kitchen table. I have been told for decades that I am missing genius in that garbage, and I haven't been told as persistently, but I have known in my life, I don't at the moment know, I outlived them, but I've known in my life some fans of Pritchett's fiction. So I'm glad I have this volume in case I become one of those people. I don't know. And then as long as we're on that subject, we might as well move ahead to contemporary fiction. I read a contemporary suburban thriller by Katie Cece. This is called You Must Be New Here. It's about a woman a mother of two children who is living in an idyllic subdivision, and the clear impression that you're being given, although it's not explicitly stated, is that she's got it all, or has close enough to it, so that she shouldn't feel blah or uncolored or anything like that. And yet she does. And when a charismatic couple moves into her neighborhood, she is swept into their life and swept away on a personal and even erotically charged relationship with, of course, the woman in that couple, because 100% of all contemporary fiction is lesbian. 100% of the characters. Somehow all the men are lesbian. All the dogs are lesbian. All the riding show horses are lesbian. And certainly all of the women are lesbian. 8% of the population at best. They're 100%. It is just taken for granted in this book that if this character falls for our character, it will be a woman and not a man. How the children popped out, I have no idea. Maybe they were bought like Dave Rubin bought his. But anyway, the couple that moves into the neighborhood have a secret of their own. And I guess that intrigue is fairly well developed in this book in a kind of connect the dots way. It's not a secret that I saw coming, but it's not an interesting secret either. It's kind of dumb once you realize what it is. It's kind of dumb, and that wouldn't matter. If that wouldn't matter at all, it wouldn't matter much if this were interesting, but it's not. And I won't say that this is spare prose, because, well, I just read a novel yesterday. I read a novel about two twins who go hunting for a murderous mountain lion because there's a bounty on the mountain lion and they think the money might change their lives. And that book was really good. It was sparse prose. Ron Hansen is sparse. There are plenty of people who have sparse prose. It's not that. This wasn't sparse prose. It was bald prose. Just like the title. The title is a cliche. The title is done in big block letters. This was bald prose. There was nothing to intrigue, nothing to keep you interested. This was boring. And whether it's V.S. Pritchett, I mean, Pritchett is a lot more eloquent. His lines are a lot more eloquent than anything in this book. But still, as far as I'm concerned, if you have written a boring book, you've written a bad book, no matter what twists you plot out on paper. Contemporary fiction and I continue not to get along. Then we have something that was served up to me by an algorithm, probably. It was, I think, one of those daily deals. I sign up for a whole bunch of those websites where you give them your email and they send you a bunch of that day's ebook deals. So $3.99, $1.99, 99 cents, and also some that are free. And I get a lot of those notifications every day. I completely ignore anything that has a price tag to it. I only get the free stuff. But I download a lot of the free stuff. I end up reading a lot of the free stuff because a lot of the free stuff is the indie world, self-published indie authors. And I find that world fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I love how much it's grown. I love how professional it's got, just right under our noses, how professional it's got. A lot of these books are indistinguishable from what you would find with a mainstream press, for good or bad. A long time ago, I was the U.S. and worldwide online editor for Historical Novel Review. I got a lot of indie work that way, so I was able to know what was out there And I haven't had that job in years and years and years, and I felt like I was missing out. So I consume as much of this stuff as possible, even though a lot of it is terrible. This thing I haven't read it yet, but it's a gay romance, a gay sports romance. It's by Rebecca Rath, and it's called Wraparound, and I gather it's a hockey romance. I must be in the algorithm for every gay self-published romance novel in the world. I must be, considering how many of these things I have read. But Summer of Sport is still going on, so I'm going to read them all. I would read it anyway. I gather from the cover that this is a hockey romance. We'll see what kind of thing it does, whether or not it's any good, whether or not it starts dropping F-bombs on the first page. Then we have a murder mystery. This also came to me from, I think, one of those email sites, one of those daily deal sites. I strongly advise them, provided you have the self-control not to buy anything. The minute you lose that self-control, the minute you think, well, 99 cents, that's not going to kill anybody. 99 cents isn't going to kill anybody. But 99 cents in a month will definitely put a dent in your spending, in your book allowance. So you have to have the self-control just to ignore anything that has a price tag to it. But the free stuff, this was been free. This is a Seamus O'Neill mystery. It's by Paul Breen, and it's called A Sudden Interest in Shakespeare. And it's about the main character, Seamus O'Neill, who is a part-time private eye. He is a ne'er-do-well. He's a local musician. He's a wreck. He's a mess. But he does occasionally get work from the Ryder Investigation Company. His gruff boss will occasionally give him work. And a paycheck. A meager paycheck. And as the novel opens, a woman wants to hire a private eye from the service to find out about a man who's gone missing. Just doesn't seem like him. Well, I know it's a police matter, but surely there's something. What do private eyes do? Surely you can do this. Something about this. I'll give you, money. I'll give you $200 to start things off. And Seamus O'Neill drifts into examining this story, and of course immediately finds out there's more to it. And all I could think the whole time was how under-realized this is. How distrusting of its readers it is. I know that I'm a tough client to satisfy. So I've been reading a lot of private eye stuff lately. In 2025, I've read a lot of private eye novels, including a lot of really good ones. And maybe it's unrealistic for me to think that this is going to be as good as, some of those, but still, all I could think was, well, I don't know who Paul Breen is. I don't know if he's an algorithm or not, but all I could think was, take this story, which has a colorful but interesting opening. It has a good, inciting mystery. That mystery is well deepened, especially there's a steep shelf drop-off point past the halfway point in the book where suddenly things start really moving. Okay, take that book and then work on it. I know that if Paul Breen heard that and he's a person, probably he's under the impression that he's worked on this a lot. But Seamus O'Neill, I am hungry, so I will get a meal, and he will go eat. And this is what he'll eat, and this is what he'll pay for it, and this is what he thought of it. And then he's done, so he's not hungry anymore. Oh, there's a bar on the left side of the room, so he'll walk over to the bar on the left side of the room, and he'll get himself a drink. I was reading this, and I was thinking, there's the bones here of something that could be made into a book, a good book. But this was boring. It did not trust its readers to put anything together. Whereas this next person, Paul Kempercross, this is his Aristotle Socarides, his SOC PI series. SOC is a part-time private eye, a part-time dive instructor, a part-time man of parts on Cape Cod, here in Massachusetts. And he drifts into cases. He doesn't always go hunting for them. He's very much not a working PI in that sense. But I reread the first of his books. I read all these things when they're out in mass market paperbacks, but that was 40 or 50 years ago. So I reread the first couple, and then I'm going to read, there aren't many in the series, I'm going to read the whole series. And I got to Death in Deep Water, which is, as you can see, about a killer whale in captivity who kills someone, kills a trainer. And I believe it or not, a complicated mystery spools out from there and is well done. Death in Deep Water is just another reminder to me of the thing that I was reminded of when I read Cool Blue Tomb, the first book in this series, which is that the series gets better and better as it goes along. So there are plenty of Private Eye series where it gets to 40 or 50 books, and I wish it hadn't. Here, I don't think there are more than 6 or 7 sock novels. And I know that I'm going to wish there were more. I remember the later ones better than I do the early ones. But the tricky part here is that the seedy SeaWorld knockoff organization that keeps this creature, well, they're going to end up being the villain no matter what, right? No matter what you do. I was fighting against that the whole time I was reading this. The whole time I was reading this, I was thinking about Death at SeaWorld and the subsequent documentary, which was about a killer whale who kills a trainer. I got to know that story really well. I reviewed Death at SeaWorld for a newspaper on the other side of the world, and read a lot, including a lot of original material that the author of the book also dredged up. Talked to a lot of people. I fell into a rabbit hole in writing that review. Not to write the review. My editor was a wonderful guy. He would have taken the first thing I wrote. But I really learned a lot about the subject. And the subject in that particular case was one particular killer whale named Tilikum, who was the size of a city bus and had a signature. His dorsal fin, the dorsal fin here is the fin of a shark. That's not what the dorsal fin of a killer whale looks like. They're 6 or 7 feet tall. And in a healthy whale, they stand straight up. And Tilikum was not a healthy animal, mentally or physically. And his curled, it drooped down and curled. And Tilikum was enormous, but he was insane. He was a psychotic killer. Through no fault of his own. He was abducted from his family in the open ocean and systematically tortured for the whole of his life. So, fed blobs of cold, dead meat loaded with antibiotics and tranquilizers that he knew perfectly well were there. He also knew that he was meant to kill things and eat them while they were still dying, eat them hot in the ocean. But no, never got that. Instead, and also, he was also built to travel 60 or 70 miles in a day. And here he was in a cement cage, a cement tank, barely big enough for him to turn around in. All day long, day after day after day, in isolation, no one around. In an intensely social species, no one around, solitary confinement. And it drove him insane. So the original aquarium that bought him was not SeaWorld. They liked what they saw because he had really dramatic markings and was getting bigger and bigger. But we'll never know for sure, I don't think, how many people he killed while connected with that aquarium. I think the only people who know that probably for sure are the lawyers for SeaWorld who bought him anyway. They bought him and brought him to the United States anyway, knowing perfectly well that he was completely unstable and getting worse. All the trainers knew you really should not be alone in the water with Tilikum. And even if you have other trainers with you, you should be really careful. Don't turn your back on this creature. Be very careful about what you do. And eventually it got to the point where once Tilikum killed someone else, once he killed someone in America, at least one person that we know of, probably more than that, once he did that, then the edict was don't get in the water with Tilikum under any circumstances. The others, but not him. He can do a solo show on his own. And also try not to get near him because these animals can move pretty fast and they are capable of beaching themselves and still using their enormous physical power to get back into water. They do that when they're hunting prey anyway. So it was touch and go until one particular trainer, a trainer named Dawn, who knew she was nobody's fool. She was a smart, courageous woman, and she knew perfectly well what Tilikum was. Her mistake was that he was always watching. By that point, he was always watching. He knew these two-legged creatures were his jailers. He knew they were his tormentors. He hated them. So he was always watching. One thing if you ever happen to know a prison guard, you'll know you had better be alert literally all the time, because I guarantee you the prisoners are alert all the time. They're watching everything. And Dawn's mistake was that she looked away for a second. She was standing next to the water where Tillicum was, and she looked away for a second, and he surged out of the water and grabbed her hair and pulled her into the tank. And this was the fancy part. So there was a subterranean restaurant where you could go with your family that had big windows of reinforced glass, so you could look at the water, you could look at the whales swimming around while you ate. So there were people who saw what he did to Dawn. And what he did to Dawn was made possible by his astonishing power. These animals are astonishingly powerful. If you're thinking a shark, no, that's not even close to the level of power. What he did to her was only made possible by that power, and it was a lot worse than just biting her into pieces. It was a lot worse than that. This is the type of thing where your eyes see it and you don't believe what you're seeing. I won't describe it, but it was horrific, and it was witnessed. And after that, there were books and articles and exposés and a documentary, and Tillicum died. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that SeaWorld and its subsidiaries don't do live killer whale shows anymore. I could be wrong about that. I think they might just stick to dolphins, who are no happier, but they're not apex predators in the way that killer whales are. So anyway, this novel handles that really well. This came out before any of that and handles it really well. This author is really smart. He is really good on the page. So Death in Deep Water was a little difficult to read, but I will definitely keep going with the series. This next one was sparked by a couple of different things. One is good. One was entirely positive, and that is Book Trek, a booktube event that is stretching throughout the summer where everybody's reading Star Trek fiction. And the other is sad, because the author is Peter David, who just recently died. And I felt the natural, Catholic guilt about that, because I never was a big fan of Peter David's writing. Not usually. Little bits and pieces here and there. But I know that he was a huge fan. I never really attacked him. I think the worst thing I ever said about him in print, which he noticed, was that he never met a cheesy joke he didn't like and would go out of his way to tell them. I don't think that was wrong, but that's not harsh criticism as far as I'm concerned anyway. But I guess if you're beloved by everybody you meet for a long time, that's going to feel like taking a shovel to the face. But I decided, I was prompted by the Book Trek chat, to reread a Peter David novel. So I reread Imadi. And I liked it. I liked it a lot more than I remembered. I don't know if that's just me being sentimental about Peter David, or maybe I'm finally giving him the credit that he always deserved. Imadi is a term that, it's not a person's name. It's a term for one true soulmate, one true beloved. It's a Betazoid term for one true beloved. And Deanna Troi, the ship's counselor on the Enterprise D, is half Betazoid and has grown up in that culture. And to her, William Riker is her Imadi. Very nice to see that term brought out of mothballs for Picard Season 3. Very nice to see that done so well. And this has a plot line. There is a bad guy. The bad guy is surprisingly seedy. I think by this point, I'm not sure of my timelines here for Next Generation fiction, but I'm pretty sure by this point Peter David was the original 800-pound gorilla in the room, so that the Star Trek group editor for Bantam Books could not tell him no. And I think that might explain why the novel Imadi is, I'm pretty sure, the first Star Trek novel where any character even raises the possibility of rape with a main character, on a main character, to a main character. I don't recall anything like that happening in any other earlier Star Trek fiction. I think it got there because Peter David could just insist that it be there. But it's about so much more than the relationship between Troi and Riker. It's also about the time-bending nature of, the eternal nature of having an Imadi, whether the other person knows it or not. We get a future Riker with side characters that Peter David always makes a coterie of side characters that are pretty much there to be punchlines. He works it out ahead of time. I'm going to make a side character who is just sloppy, so I get to tell all sorts of funny stuff about sloppiness. Maybe it's that he had to die to please me, but it didn't bother me as much this time around. In fact, sometimes I found it charming. A lot of the characters from the original series and also the Next Generation, a lot of side characters from the Next Generation are wonderfully portrayed in this book. It's not just Troy and either Riker, the present-day Riker or the older Riker. A lot of them are wonderfully portrayed. And it also involves time travel, as you can see. That is the Guardian of Forever on the cover there, from the greatest Star Trek episode of them all, The City on the Edge of Forever. And amazingly, heart-wrenchingly, at a couple of points in the book, including right at the beginning, we get a demonstration through the Guardian of Forever will, of course, remind long-term Star Trek fans of one particular relationship. And it's amazing to think of that as an Imadi-type relationship. It's Jim Kirk and Edith Keeler. That was wonderful. To use that as a persistent touchstone was wonderful. Wonderfully satisfying. Maybe it's just that I'm older, so I'm more sentimental about Star Trek. Maybe that's the case, but I really enjoyed this. I don't know if I enjoyed it enough to read the sequel. There was a sequel called Imadi 2. I did not at all like the plot development in Star Trek The Next Generation where Deanna Troi had a romantic plot line with Worf. I did not like that at all. I don't think it worked at all. I gather, I don't think I ever read Imadi 2, but I gather from the cover that it's going to be about that. But I love this. Very happy to have reread it. Glad to have reread it. And then we can finish up. Sorry, this video has gone long. I could go on. But I'll finish up with another book that is a new book that I just read. It's not out yet. I don't think it comes out until the fall. I loved it. Absolutely. I didn't plan it this way, and I'm glad to end a Friday Reads on the strongest possible recommendation. This is by Scott Eyman, who wrote a biography of John Wayne that I just loved. I just loved it. And this is his new book, a biography of Joan Crawford, that had, from what I gather from his author's note, a good deal of help from the Crawford estate. Lots of stuff here that no other biographer of Joan Crawford has ever seen or used. But it really doesn't matter. I no offense to the author, but it really doesn't matter how much groundbreaking material he had to use. It's all a matter of execution. And he is so good. He is just so good at writing about these characters. He starts off this book. I'm tempted to read you the whole opening passage, but I don't know how he'd feel about that. I'd love to get him on this channel and talk to him. I'll have to see if maybe that's possible, if anybody wants to see that. Not that anybody is watching at the end of the video, because nobody watches past the first 60 seconds. But still, now that I think about it, that's a great idea. I would love to try and see if he's available to do that on a YouTube channel. I don't know if he does that. But anyway, he opens this book. Before he gets to the story of Joan Crawford, he opens this book with rare, hardly ever seen home movies of Joan Crawford out hiking with a group of men. This glamorous movie star, the most glamorous movie star of them all at the time, unless you count maybe Barbara Stanwyck, out hiking with a group of men, camping with a group of men with tin cups and tents and whatnot. And the author describes who are these men, one in particular. Could I piece together the information that I know from other sources and figure out who this man is? But it's more than that. It's more than figuring out who this one central man is. It's figuring out, using deduction to figure out what he meant to her. It's absolutely thrilling. It's just the first 3 pages before you even get to chapter 1. And then he moves on. He moves on in the way that he did with John Wayne, through the story of this person's life, her personal triumphs, her personal letdowns. Also very good about taking us into her older age, when she stops being able to get around quite as much, when friends start noticing that she's not quite the powerhouse force in the room that she once was. And what is that? Do you worry about that? Or do you just accept that? It was just marvelous. It was just marvelous. And like with the John Wayne book, it was also really good on her films, which, when you're doing a biography of a film star, you would think that would go without saying, but I don't know how many biographies of film stars I've read where the biographer was poor on the films. And don't even get me started, not film stars, but directors. Don't even get me started about the books I've read about Alfred Hitchcock. that are just so poor on his movies that I think it's essential for a book to really take off, and boy, oh boy, does it work here. Oh my God. This was just fantastic. So I don't know quite what to say any more than that. We'll wrap up my Friday reads with the strongest possible recommendation. I don't know if we've seen this book on this channel. I don't know if I've got the advanced copy yet. But I cannot recommend it strongly enough. Put it on your list. Get your library to order a couple of copies if they haven't already. I mean, I assume they will because they would all have got the John Wayne book. If they're not, though, if they're asleep at the wheel, tell them that you want them to stock a couple of copies. So I'll end with that. I'll end with a strong recommendation. That's good. I've read a lot of other things this week. This was an extraordinarily good reading week, mainly because it was so hot I couldn't really do anything. My little pumpkin here did not want to go on any kind of outdoor excursions. Why would she when the pavement is hot and you're panting and uncomfortable after a minute? Why would she? No. So it's been an extraordinarily good reading week. It was fine by me. So I'll hope for another one. And of course, with any Friday reads, I want to know what you're reading. How's your reading week going? Was this good for you? A lot of you have been in heat waves too. Does that help? Or do you find that even if you have a little air conditioner, I have a little AC unit that keeps this room bearable for the bean. I am now convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that I am really, really wicked pissa old. Because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, this heat wave did it for me. Showed me beyond a shadow of a doubt that if I did not have Frida here, I wouldn't even have a fan going. I have become Jerry Seinfeld's parents, who never turn on the air conditioning and don't seem to realize that it's 100 degrees in their condo in Boca del Vista. I have become Jerry Seinfeld's parents. I now know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. I wouldn't use any of this stuff if I weren't trying to keep a little terrier cool. But what about you? Whether you have AC or not, does a heat wave just make you so lethargic that all you want to do is watch videos? Or do you do more reading then? How was your reading week? Any standouts? Any remarkable things? I love to hear about that in my emails anyway, but feel free to talk in the comments as well. So I'm going to wrap this up. Sorry for the length. Oh my God. But I'll be back. Thank you.